I made the switch from kind of employed in the NHS to freelancing for the NHS round about the time of the Lansley Health Act reform. At that time, I was working in a PCT, Primary Care Trust, and they were abolished under the Health and Care Act. I took that kind of incredibly badly.
John, welcome. Where did it all start for you?
Well, I suppose my very first job in healthcare was I was a domestic cleaner, shown by an older guy how to use the polishing machine and the hoover, and away I went. So that gave me my first experience of healthcare.
It's quite amazing, isn't it, when there's something quite simple as a concept to be rolled out, but without the complex political system to navigate through.
Yes, it is. And when they put their mind to do something and there's a political will and funding, it can happen very quickly because there aren't so many bureaucratic or political hoops to jump through. It's just we've decided we're going to do it. Here's the money, get on and do it.
John, welcome to Community Podcasts.
Thank you.
Second session officially since kicking off. For our listeners, John Wicks is an executive healthcare leader from the UK NHS and has spent the last 5+ years in Saudi Arabia. So John, to jump straight into it, just keen to get your journey really from in your early stages of your career. Where did it all start for you?
Sure. Well, I suppose my very first job in healthcare was I was a domestic cleaner as a 16-year-old in our local general hospital. So it's kind of like a pre-teen or rather a pre-student job. And in those days, no health and safety training, no kind of vetting of any kind. I just rocked up as a 16-year-old, shown by an older guy how to use the polishing machine and the hoover, and away I went. So that gave me my first experience of, if you like, healthcare. And then through university, I did a degree in international studies, which was kind of not health and care related, but I'd always had this thought in my mind that this was an industry that interested me and I would look to do in the future if I could. So I then joined a graduate training scheme for general management in the NHS. It was a time when they were deliberately trying to move away from the kind of cliche of healthcare administrators to general management, a more professionalised approach to managing the industry. And as soon as I arrived, I absolutely loved it, and it enthused me, and I made quite quick progress and stayed in hospital management to director level for about 12 years. And then for the next 12 years or so, I moved to commissioner organisations and the Department of Health, and as well as a spell in local government. So I've got a very kind of well-rounded view of the industry in the NHS from all sides. And then an opportunity arose to go freelance, basically. So I set up my own company as a consultant and continued to work in England in the NHS. All my clients were NHS organisations. But just before the kind of COVID epidemic, a job came up in Saudi Arabia to work with the Ministry of Health here to realise the Saudi Vision 2030 goals for healthcare. So I arrived here, just beat the lockdown. So I was locked down in Riyadh for most of 2020, as we all were in our own way. And have been here ever since.
What was the lockdown like in Saudi?
Well, it was interesting to compare the two kind of approaches. I mean, you'll recall, there's some controversy at the time that Britain was a little slow to react to put in some of the kind of lockdown provisions. Saudi was the opposite. It kind of restricted movement. Very quickly, schools were closed, mosques were closed, there was a curfew. So literally no leaving your home except for very specific purposes such as food shopping or medical appointments between particular hours. So they kind of went quickly and hard, and it was quite successful. They then ramped up a very effective kind of mass screening and mass vaccination program. And when we look back, I think Saudi Arabia coped remarkably well. It was one of the more effective responses.
And I'm keen to dig into that because I think, having supported various healthcare organisations in both UK and Middle East and seeing the contrast in terms of their operations and how they just generally perceive the health economy, what do you think are the sort of obvious contrast between the UK, the NHS and the Saudi health system? Keen to just get from you what the obvious gaps are there.
Yeah, I mean, one of the primary differences is not such a political hot potato as it is in the UK. It's always been a potential for bad news stories, for kind of managing public and patient expectations and performance, and it's all very much publicly on display. And it may be something to do with the kind of political system, of course. It's not a democracy as such, it's a monarchy. Yeah. There's no kind of back and forth about what the policy should be. You're told what it is and you just get on with it. So that has its pros and cons. It means sometimes policy doesn't get as kind of publicly tested and proved in the fire of media and public opinion, and therefore sometimes gets stuck because that critical thinking hasn't been applied quickly or early enough. But things like privatisation of healthcare provision, the Saudi health system, the government-funded one, is quite similar to the NHS. It's funded through taxation. Well, not even taxation. It's funded rather through government funding. Yep. It is free at the point of delivery for Saudi citizens. But there's a very open and kind of straightforward approach that they want to introduce more private companies and principles into the delivery of healthcare. So when you think again how touchy that subject can be in the UK, it isn't at all. It is a stated policy direction that they want more government money spent on private provision. Okay. And it will still be free to their citizens, but they want to encourage whatever innovation is out there, entrepreneurialism, cost effectiveness, things that if managed well, the private sector can bring.
And what about appetite for change? I think the NHS can be quite notorious in not trying to be to sell to, but certainly introduce new technologies, new innovations, new ways of working. Does Saudi have the same problem?
It has the same problem, but in a different way. There is huge appetite and readiness for change, be it technical. It's a very digitally aware society. Smartphones and digital applications are prevalent and everybody uses them. But the inertia sometimes comes for more, shall we say, traditional reasons, like maybe political inertia or rivalries between different parts of public ministries. So the vision is clearly stated and the direction. Sometimes implementation just gets hung up because of a kind of a risk aversion of not wanting to fail or be seen to be failing, maybe not wanting to give up some power and influence to different parts of the system. So there are different dynamics in play, but generally it's incredibly open and receptive to doing things differently, and is really keen to find partners to do that with.
And I guess they haven't got that historical sort of conflicts of interest or the historical politics that they've got to navigate. I guess they're starting from somewhat more of a green landscape, would you say?
Yes, they are. And there are also some some variations in provision that they want to address. So there are big population centres in Riyadh, the capital, major cities on the west coast, Jeddah, and on the east coast, Dammam. But then there's a huge territory of smaller settlements, villages and towns where maybe historically the access to healthcare has been less good. Not as many hospitals, not as many doctors per head of population, not as many services available. So there's a kind of a history of people travelling to the big cities to get their healthcare when needed. So they're now looking to push out healthcare availability to more parts of the country and to level up in that way. But again, also looking to do that innovatively. So remote care delivery, virtual healthcare. I think Saudi is probably one of the leading countries in thinking and deploying virtual care solutions in hard-to-reach places. There's something called the Seha Hospital, which is a virtual care hospital. Its whole purpose is to concentrate the kind of medical and technical expertise in one place, but then use digital communications to manage the flow of patient data and delivery of care without having, if you like, to have boots on the ground in all the different places of the country.
It's quite amazing, isn't it, when there's something quite simple as a concept to be rolled out, but without the I guess the complex political system to navigate through. I think if you've got a very clear base to deploy something as simple as that, it's a good starting point for other countries to start emulating the same, right? Lose some of that.
Yes, it is. And when they put their mind to do something and there's a political will and funding, it can happen very quickly. So it is something to be quite envious of at times. Yes. That there are some examples where an idea can move from idea to realization incredibly quickly because there aren't so many bureaucratic or political hoops to jump through. It's just, we've decided we're going to do it, here's the money, get on and do it.
And for our listeners, I mean, there's going to be many associates of the community where they've either worked in Saudi or worked across the Middle East already, and there'll be a big group of people I know that will have aspirations to work in the Middle East as well and share some of their knowledge and expertise from the UK. What advice would you give the latter, those people that are looking to support that Saudi health economy? What are the key things that they would look for?
Your experience and your knowledge, and even your management practices, what you're used to doing, are highly valued out here. So if you have the opportunity to bring those skills and experience to the region, you'll find a very welcoming place for you to deploy them. And the only caveat to that is you need to be very kind of attentive to and attuned to the cultural environment and maybe some of the leadership styles and expectations. So, you know, I've maybe seen some colleagues who are technically hugely able, but have not managed to make that transition because of maybe frustrations with how leadership is applied, how decisions are made, maybe the extent to which there is kind of opportunities for direct engagement in some of the policy thinking or communications. I mean, you can't write a blanket rule about these things because every organisation has its own style and maybe leadership approach. But you're in an Arabic country with often Muslim traditions which apply throughout all aspects of life, both private and public and the workplace. So be respectful and willing and receptive to what those are, and take the signals from your colleagues. Because if you go in like a bulldozer with, you know, I've got 20 years telling me what the right thing to do is here, you know, just take a step back and apply your positive contribution in a way that will land well.
And with Healthco as an organisation, do they adopt the same in terms of that pragmatism to bring in international skills into the business, but with the expectation that they've got to be, I guess, a bit more diplomatic in the way that they integrate into the culture of the business?
Yes, I mean, I've been there for 5 years, and it's probably gone through different phases and different leaders as well, who may have different approaches and intentions. But they do look for international experts and maybe apply them in a more targeted and focused way than when I first arrived. There was a cohort of about, it started as 7 and then grew quite rapidly to about 15 or 20 even, and we were sort of liberally applied throughout the organisation in ways they thought we could help. Now that recruitment is maybe more targeted to particular posts, particular kind of leadership gaps. And of course, there's also the policy, which I'm not sure that it applies to the same extent, say, in the UAE, but of what's called Saudization, which is a deliberate policy to increase the proportion of the workforce that is Saudi citizens, both male and female. So there are some quotas, to put it bluntly, of what proportion of a workforce can be non-Saudi, and that means the biggest recruitment pushes are to bring forward the local workforce and graduates and younger people. I mean, that's one other thing. There's a huge respect and encouragement for education in the country, again for men and women. So higher education is very valued and encouraged. So again, that helps them to build a very capable local workforce, which is the direction increasingly they want to go.
It's interesting. I think for me, having supported Saudi for about 4 years across their health economies in different facets, it's interesting to see the journeys, and you start to see the sort of export of people's experiences and how things have gone really well or not so good, but sometimes a lot of it's down to just the simple people cultural adaptations of an assignment, not really the hard skills or a project deviation as such. It's typically down to, as you said, that cultural alignment and just that adaptability to work with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've, I can remember just anecdotes of say there was a colleague from the UK who joined the team, and technically, again, very able, but one day we actually were sort of sharing accommodation, and I could hear a Zoom call kind of going on in the other room, and voices were getting raised, and I thought, oh gosh, it's a bit tasty, not really used to hearing this. And I could hear this guy saying, "Let me speak, will you let me speak? Let me speak!" Like this. And I thought, my goodness, what is going on? And after the call finished, I said, wow, that was a bit awkward. Who were you talking to? And he said, oh, I was talking to my boss. This was his Saudi boss. Now, he was gone in about 2 months after that event, because frankly, it just gives you an illustration of sometimes you could be totally clear in your mind what the right thing to do is, how something should be managed, but you just can't talk in those sort of ways to your hosts, which essentially is what they are. And you just need to maintain your respect, make your point, by all means, make your point, but there are ways and to do it and not to do it,
Like the saying is iron fist, velvet glove, you can make your point, but delivered well.
Sure.
And what can the NHS take from Saudi, having spent, over 5 years there now, and you've seen, the good, the bad, the ugly in terms of best practice, clinically, operationally, and just managing change from a digital perspective too. What can the NHS take from that, your own experience, do you think? What would be valuable to them right now, given the challenges that there's a plethora of challenges that they're navigating?
Yes, I mean, I have to admit, I've been a little bit disappointed by some of the just signalling that's been coming out from the government, to be frank. So, it feels like deja vu for someone who's been around a number of years like myself. That we're back to league tables, sort of naming and shaming, punishment for those deemed to be failing. Because I just don't think that approach is going to work. There are many sort of systemic challenges, and they've often been the same for decades, that mean some areas can be successful
Agreed.
and others can't. And sort of personalising it in that way just means that you put off the most capable leaders from taking on the toughest jobs. So it's a kind of lose-lose as far as I can see. But I think to kind of go beyond that kind of just what's the tactics of driving up performance, to really release the opportunities of the digital innovation era. And I know there are many companies in the UK that do have great examples and kind of foots in the door with providers. It's always been a challenge to kind of move a great case study from one hospital to another one. There's still all these kind of maybe barriers. So one thing that Saudi is kind of working on is they have a similar model to the ICSs called clusters, but really encouraging solutions that work to be shared between the clusters and to be deployed in a systematic way. So if you have a good solution that is saving money, improving care, if the NHS can find the political or the managerial vehicle for spreading that more successfully, that would be a great improvement. And it is something Saudi is really working hard on, to not sort of get hung up on kind of pseudo competition, that any idea, if it's not ours, and we've got to be very skeptical of it. They really want people to share the best of ideas and kind of do the development and the proving stage once, and then spread it as effectively as they can.
We've got a number of health tech leaders, health tech digital concepts and products, that hit that wall, what you've alluded to there, where I just feel sometimes, and of course they're now naturally turning their attention to the Americas, to the Middle East, to Asia, and looking at their health economies and where they can plug that type of concept in. If they've got something quite unique that is probably a low-hanging fruit to a healthcare organisation, but a no-brainer for the patient in improving care, as you said, or improving efficiencies. I still sort of scratch my head after 15 years of supporting the NHS, where and why are these barriers there between these trusts or between the ICSs that they are today? I guess the political interference between the trust in adopting some of those simple solutions.
Yes, and it's often just a lack of knowledge and awareness of how to engage with public with private sector entrepreneurial startup companies.
Is it leadership? Would you say it's a leadership issue?
Yes, it's partly a leadership, but it's also just a sort of a technical knowledge and competence issue, because procurement in the NHS again is a bit of a closed book. There's sort of NHS supplies and long supply chains and logistics that kind of the day-to-day frontline and middle managers or senior managers don't get a lot of experience with. And even in Saudi Arabia, we've been thinking of how can we make kind of the innovation portal wide and welcoming enough to really, for us to take benefit of everything that's out there. Because we haven't got good systems at the moment for people bringing their ideas or their opportunities to our attention. We haven't got a very effective way at the moment of saying, look, we've got these 3 problems that we really want to focus on, and if you've got an idea or a product or a design process that helps with that, we really want to know. Or even if you've got a great idea, come to us, we'll incubate it, we'll accelerate it, we'll invest in it even. So it's a challenge for all countries, but for something that is quite set in its ways like the NHS, I think that is doubly hard. And I'm sure there are, the kind of innovation unit of the NHS is a great resource for trying to address that. But if you can get it out there in the hospitals up and down the country and the ICSs, I think they really need to take a deliberate focus and prioritize how are we engaging with innovation, because things that will make their budgetary life happier, their patient experience happier, their patient and quality outcomes better. There are things out there that will push all of those buttons, and they just need to understand how do they engage with that more effectively.
Is it a question of like commercial acumen, in terms of actual like business acumen, commercial awareness across that leadership team? I do find there are many senior operators within that health system in the UK where I don't think that they necessarily get all of that sort of commercial awareness as they continue to grow in such a critical leadership post, making those decisions.
I'm sure that is true, because again, the kind of the funding mechanisms and the cash flow and the contracting environment is very particular to the NHS, and just some of that commercial awareness isn't there, and unfortunately what that does, I think, is maybe breeds suspicion as I think I'm getting ripped off. I'm not sure how or to what extent, but I'm pretty damn sure I am. So I'm just sort of keep this at arm's length, and it's more a sort of a fear response than it is a kind of a rational one. And I think also from the other side of the table, for entrepreneurs and new companies who may have great products or great ideas, coming up with a sustainable way of monetizing that, I think, is equally difficult, and maybe you need to kind of work on that together with the client and the supplier to think, okay, we've got a good idea here that we think we should be doing. Yeah. But what is the contractual vehicle for it? What is the kind of share of risk? What is the kind of the revenue model that will obviously reward us for our efforts and supplying it, but also make it affordable and useful to you? So some of these things may need both parties to kind of almost just work it out with an open book approach to make things happen.
I think there is a piece around that. I'm not sure quite what that looks like, but I think a lot of the executive operators and executive leaders in the NHS, in having greater commercial acumen, to get closer to some of this expenditure and what does good look like in terms of value in the market, and having a true understanding of what good value is as a concept, because I think that would help them with their appetite to adopt some of these things. And I think they get the sort of the red flags waved at them pretty quickly the second they want to step out of this or explore that as a solution. And we have a number of affiliates as part of our community where they have tremendous UEC solutions, elective recovery, some of the latest EPR support mechanisms, without having to go through spending with the big guys, the big platforms that are out there, but they just don't get a look in. So I think there is probably partly a bit more of an upskilling piece with the leaders. But you mentioned entrepreneurs, and before the podcast, I asked you a question, and I'm going to share it because your answer was excellent. And one of my questions was, what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs of today? And one of the opening statements was, well, you don't have to be an arsehole to succeed in such a competitive market. And that is absolutely one of the best answers I've had in a little while. But could you expand on that? Because I'm keen to just understand about apply. If you're an entrepreneur, they're going to be looking to people like yourself that have succeeded in healthcare and taking some sort of aspiration from that. What did you mean by that?
Okay, yeah, I wondered after supplying that answer whether I should have maybe toned it down a bit. But what I was driving at there, and it maybe touches on this a lack of commercial awareness in NHS leaders, of which I would count myself predominantly as one. It's where I spent the bulk of my career. So sometimes there can almost be this received wisdom that you have to be a kind of a bit of a cut and thrust, take no prisoners. It's a zero-sum game. I'm going to win, you're going to lose, and this is kind of what you're dealing with. And I suppose in giving that answer, it was my encounters with the most successful entrepreneurs have been kind of remarkably uplifting, in that those who understand that by giving of their advice, their support, even their contacts and their network, to help others maybe working in the same space, those kind of behaviours repay themselves, because when you need some of that help, there'll be a network available to you that's only too happy to give it. And there's probably very few spaces where you are sort of, if you like, absolutely in head-to-head competition. It's either him or me. So I need to kind of be a bit careful with my kind of intellectual property, or whatever you want to call it.
True.
Because the most success comes by kind of lifting all the boats together, I think.
Yeah.
And certainly even just applying it to leaders rather than entrepreneurs. I mean, I've come across all kinds of leaders, from the kind of Malcolm Tucker, effing and blinding. I mean, my very first job in the NHS, I had a chief executive mentor. It was a big teaching hospital. And my first week, and I was keeping a diary, so I kind of wrote this down. My first management lesson when I came to the NHS was, John, in a place this big, the only way you can manage effectively is through fear. And I thought, oh, right, okay, I'll remember that. But I very quickly discarded it, because the most effective leaders get things done by inspiration and example and inclusion and involvement, and that's not typical. But I guess I had that in mind when I was using my sort of arsehole epithet there.
But you know what? I think it's distinguishing the difference between a manager and a leader. And I think a manager is very much that usually the support mechanism for a bigger boss, but usually the barks that shouts the orders, and it's more about the stick rather than the carrot. And I guess in a true leader, as you've alluded to, much more about empowerment and support, and maybe giving people the space and the autonomy to come up with those decisions themselves. I love being asked by some of the team, Matt, what do you think I'm doing? I'll bat it straight back, well, what do you think?
Yeah,
and they'll say,
sure.
well, maybe this. Well, let's roll with that. Let's see where we get with that, and
definitely.
You get a different type of gel between the team, I think, when you've got that type of respect for each other, if nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this applies internationally as well. That these personality types exist in all organisations and in all cultures, but it's kind of what works best.
And what makes a good leader in terms of the key ingredients that come straight to mind? What would you say are the absolute critical elements to make a good leader? I
think they need to be able to articulate a clear vision for the organisation, and then to continually sort of use that as a point of reference for whatever decisions we're trying to make or choices we have. Let's keep in mind our vision and our values. So if they concentrate on communicating those frequently and effectively, and then creating this culture of curiosity and inquiry and constructive criticism, I think that tests the organisation to solve problems and have kind of fit solutions before the problem has overwhelmed you because you haven't really thought about it as an organisation. So it is the other thing I've always thought in leaders to be one of the most important traits to have is just good judgment. Now, of course, everyone would say, well, yeah, everyone tries to take the right decision, but again, you sometimes get decisions that are made through kind of laziness or dogma or, it's what I'm used to. But judgment encapsulates really taking into account what are all the drivers of this decision, what's the context, what's the kind of option appraisal that we're looking at, and then to arrive at the right decision and to then push that through and communicate it most effectively. Vision, values, communicating those consistently, and it's ultimately sound judgment that people trust this guy can or woman can make the right decision.
Yeah, and both from a sort of professional and personal lens. I mean, you've achieved a lot through your career. You've experienced new regions, new cultures. Immensely different chapters in your life. What is one of the lessons that you've learned in your life, which perhaps you may have wished you'd learned a bit sooner? What sort of springs to mind?
For that, I would say that it's never too early to test yourself. So don't forego or delay applying for that promotion, applying for that new job opportunity, just taking maybe a completely different direction in your life. Don't put that off thinking, oh, I haven't got enough information, I haven't got enough experience. You will acquire that through the act of that kind of test. So it's the sort of feel the fear and do it anyway. So don't put off aspiring to continually improve, test yourself, take on more responsibility, take on new and different challenges. I found in the NHS, I had another lesson which is kind of the opposite, which it's not great really for as a kind of advert for the NHS, which was it's never too late to do something. So you could find a project or a decision or a task could have been delayed, either you've procrastinated or your leaders have, but if you eventually get round to it's kind of okay, and the time you've lost has not been missed particularly because it's happened eventually. Because I think sometimes people worry, oh God, I've missed the deadline, it's too late, I can't do it now. No, just get it done, get out the way, and in 6 months it'll all be forgotten. So that does hold true to an extent, but it's never too early. It's never too early to take that next step, even with incomplete information. Just know what you don't know, but take the risk and move forward.
It's that always learning attitude, isn't it? I think that's such a rare skill sometimes to find, because I think you get to a certain point, even midway through one's career, and they just might think they know enough and they'll close the door to learning new things. And I think that's a tremendous mistake that people make when they get, and it's not a sense of arrogance, it's probably a slightly stronger word for it, but there is that sort of misunderstanding that there's always opportunity to learn and grow. And
it is sort of getting too dependent on that sort of comfort zone of I've achieved a certain status, I've achieved a certain level of respect, I know I can do my job, I'm really good at it. But you can then stagnate, and there will come a time when maybe circumstances overtake you and you have to then re-enter a job pool or look for something else, and you'll find I'm a bit kind of shelf expired because I wasn't keeping up with things.
But it's okay, I think. I mean, there are many examples for many successes where people have to go back 2 steps to go forward 4, that happens. And I just think the moment you close that door to innovation and learning new things and challenging yourself and pushing yourself out of that comfort zone, there is that, a lot of these self-help books, they talk about, it's not the journey, it's the destination, and you people want to find happiness there, when they get their house or their car or that job or whatever. But I truly think it's neither. I just think, happiness is along the way. Like, it's the person you become through that journey. It's not the journey or that, destination.
No, I agree completely. And that's why I'm one of the other sort of pre-podcast questions I think you asked me was about, how do you define success? And I agree, it can't be defined so much as the destination itself. It's the way you get there. And I suppose the other thing I applied to that is that there's something special about achievement that is the result of kind of intention and effort and perseverance to get there. So it's not just, I reached a particular level of seniority, or I reached a certain turnover with my company, so that is obviously success. It's, is the reward for struggle is, I think, what really makes success taste sweet, or gives it that kind of extra value, because many people live very contented and successful lives, but something that you've striven for is particularly special, I think.
Yeah. And what would you say that are some of the key habits for you that have impacted your success? What's been some of the key things that you've had to really keep in mind throughout your career to have that continuity of work and see success in your eyes?
Yeah, I think flexibility and a constant attention to the needs of your client. So particularly when I went freelance, I was supporting, as I said earlier, NHS organisations. I'd be moving around maybe every 6, 12, 18 months. These were the typical lengths of my assignment.
Yeah.
And I always kind of had a rule of thumb that after no longer than 3 months, you know everything you need to know about the challenge, the organisation, the people you have to work with. I think I've certainly come across people throughout my career where you're sort of introduced to someone and you say, hello, who are you and what's your responsibility? And they say, well, I'm quite new. I came here 6 months ago. I'm the mental health commissioner for XYZ, and I would always sort of slightly blanch and say, you're not new.
Yeah.
You're not new.
Yeah.
After 6 months, many assignments are kind of done, dusted, and you've achieved or you haven't. So you have to go in with a flexible mindset, a curious mindset, identify the problem quickly, and then just get on with it. And I think also I would always kind of immerse myself in the organisation. So I would try very hard not to be, John's he's the management consultant. It would be, John, no, he's our team member who's leading on the XYZ project, or who's responsible for this particular team in the organisation. So you kind of blur those lines between being the outsider and the insider quickly. Because people need to believe that you kind of take a stake in the future of this team, this organisation as well, that you're serious about it, and that you're not just there for the day rate or whatever it might be. You're kind of invested and want to do the best you can.
Yeah. It's shared accountability, right? And I think that's one of the key things to differentiate yourself away from a lot of the big consultancies and some of the other smaller entities. Outsourcing a project is one thing, but actually becoming part of that team and integral to it is probably lesson number one in differentiating yourself in that market.
Yeah, that's right. I suppose one of the other kind of eureka moments for me was I made the switch from kind of employed in the NHS to freelancing for the NHS round about the time of the Lansley Health Act reforms. So I'm going back to about 2012. Yeah. At that time, I was working in a PCT, Primary Care Trust, and they were abolished under the Health and Care Act. And I took that kind of incredibly badly because...
Like many did.
Yeah. Simply because we'd worked really hard. We'd got that organisation to a place where I thought, my goodness, we're actually going to make some really exciting changes here. Be serious about patient engagement, making, kind of evidence-based investment decisions, working with our other partners. And then it was all kind of taken away. And I was at risk of becoming the grumpy old man in the corner who just couldn't get with the program, and I'd have just sort of disappeared in a wave of negativity and sort of cynicism of why oh why. And my escape route was to get a secondment to the Department of Health to actually implement those changes and the new architecture from the heart of the kind of government department responsible for it. And that kind of just flipped me from negative back to positive, and from there I was able to kind of open my horizons to do something completely different as a freelancer. So that's the other side of the coin, which is don't necessarily put all your emotional investment into this here today, gone tomorrow organizational model. You are not defined by the organization you work for. You are defined by what you bring, your skills, your experience, and you can apply them anywhere. And if some government minister in his ignorance or whatever other motivation decides he wants to change something, okay, that's his prerogative, that's democracy, whatever you want to call it. And we will get on and do our thing in whatever comes next. But don't let it get to you to that extent where it makes you kind of dysfunctional.
It's a really valuable life lesson, actually, you touch on. And I think it's sometimes just zooming out a bit and actually not taking things necessarily directly personally. And being able to, as you said, see the value in what you do and how you carry yourself, I guess, as a professional.
Yes, exactly.
In many ways. Was that one of the... and obviously leaving a substantive position at a senior level already and then launching your own consultancy way back then, that's got to be one of the sort of prouder moments of your career. Is there anything else sort of beyond that in terms of on reflection now, in terms of like some of the proudest moments you look back on?
No, I think that was a moment of kind of significant consequence and change, and I was glad I did it because, and it was a calculated risk. I had I had a package in inverted commas when I left the NHS, so I had some cushion with which to experiment, and I thought, well, I will set up this company, and either there won't be a demand for my services and I can't find any work, or I won't enjoy it and I won't enjoy the flitting around, to different parts of the country. But I'll give it a go, and if not, I can always, try and just re-enter an employed situation somewhere. But it kind of took off immedately, and I had, maybe those were the sort of halcyon days, I don't know, of the kind of 20 teens, shall we say, where I had amazing opportunities. It took me all over the country, working with different organisations, different health systems, and it was just kind of mutually reinforcing. The previous job would generate a reputation and an interest and an opportunity somewhere else, and it was only when the kind of the next opportunity on the list happened to be abroad, which was another kind of point in the crossroads, that taking that opened up another new chapter. So the sort of from employed to self-employed to kind of international are the kind of three chapters of my career so far, I think.
And is that some of the key decisions that have shaped you the most? Do you think more the latter, moving to Saudi and setting up life there in its fullest form? Has that been one of the biggest sort of decisions you've made?
Yes, and not necessarily deliberate or what I intended. I mean, I came out originally with a 1-year contract with the possibility that it might stretch to 2. But once I arrived here and saw the work that was being done and the opportunity to be part of that, I was only too happy to stay for longer and to 1 year turned into 5, as you said at the beginning. So and then other things have come with it. So I've found a new family out here. I'm now married. I would call the Middle East my home primarily, because my wife, and who is from the region, lives here, and we live here, and I have a stepdaughter living with us. So life changed in ways I had no expectation of back when I arrived, but it's been a great journey to take.
It's the stars aligning, right? And I think it's good for the listeners to see something like that as a real example, because people will be in different stages of their life, and some may be considering options right now in terms of what they do, and certainly how the sort of global economics are working right now. There are a lot of people in the UK that are looking to move to the Middle East. So it's an interesting point you make about actually sometimes taking that leap of faith, calculated risks, of course, but having a bit of faith in yourself that you can integrate into that society and find a good career in the GCC region.
Yeah, certainly, and I wouldn't sort of place any judgment pro or against colleagues and the choices they make. But if you are looking to come out to this region, it's a great lifestyle. It's incredibly safe. Just personal security. You don't have to look over your shoulders for kids on mopeds while you're using a smartphone in the street. And some of those other maybe cultural restrictions around women have certainly relaxed in Saudi Arabia. It remains a country with its traditions and its expectations of modesty in dress and behaviour, but things like women's driving, head covering, these things are tolerated as completely, and indeed encouragement for women in the workplace is that there's absolutely no limit on that whatsoever. So a female thinking of coming to Saudi Arabia could do so with kind of lots of positivity, and indeed may even find an improvement in how they feel about their personal safety or risk in just moving around, and how you find life here. And
in terms of concluding today's podcast, in true community partners fashion, we always ask a curveball question of some sort, and one that I wanted to pick out today was noting your career journey. What you've done. You've achieved a lot of different things in that health system, in the health economy in both the UK and the Middle East, and starting, as you said, as the cleaner in the hospital, taking that type of advice, and then to being one of those executive advisors in Saudi. If you could go back in time to give yourself any sort of key crucial advice, what would be one of the first or second things that spring to mind?
I think that it doesn't matter where you start your journey, just keep your eyes open for every opportunity. Don't close your mind to thinking I am a one of these. I am a doctor, I am a nurse, I am a manager, so this is my career track that I'm on. There are so many diverging paths you can take. So find your career in a kind of an organic way. Don't think I'm on a ladder and I can see the next sort of 10 years, 15 years of promotions. I should be a one of these by that time. And I think particularly in this day and age where there are so many rapidly changing innovations and companies and opportunities for bright people to express themselves and get career satisfaction and
that
remuneration.
Younger generation, they think differently as well. The younger generation of today, it's not always about getting to an exec post or the big salary for them, you know, it's either work-life balance or it's they have slightly different drivers as well.
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, there's this cliche, isn't it, of, you know, follow your dream, but you know, dreams are nice to have, and they're kind of out there, and maybe give you a sort of broad kind of place you might want to head towards. But the way you get there, you won't know yet.
Yeah.
But you just got to be looking for it, listening for it, and taking those opportunities as they appear.
Yeah.
And one door will lead to another,
Yeah.
to another, to another.
Yeah.
And I think that's it, really.
Yeah.
That's.
I mentor a young guy, and he's a tremendous rugby player, and he's 19 years old, and he's going through those questions and that at the moment. And I think the conversation we had was about following a typical traditional career track and going through those sort of hierarchies in a certain industry, or be it having the brave optimism to make your own lane a little bit. And there's a saying, and I'm not sure where it's from, but there's a saying that I really love, and it's those that want to lead the orchestra need to be willing to turn their back on the crowd. You know, and I think it's quite powerful to get you thinking a little bit differently.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, unfortunately, some of the constraints for people wanting to work and think of their career in this way can just be very practical. It can be money. You know, the lure of the monthly paycheck can't be underestimated.
Agreed.
You know,
Agreed.
and sometimes when you're building something for the future, you might have a prospect of, you know, many months of either zero revenue or not enough to kind of keep body and soul together. So just again being pragmatic and open-minded, but looking for solutions to help you with that. And it, you know, I know not everyone has the bank of mum and dad and all this sort of thing, but if you got enough, think about taking that risk, because it could lead to much more in the future.
Yeah. That's awesome advice. John, thank you so much for your time today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Enjoyed the discussion.
Yeah,
yes, thanks
too.
again.